Hey there guys, so I know this is far from the most picturesque place that I've done a video for you all so far, but it's been kind of a process getting home from LA, although Ignite Festival totally rocked. But I did want to get in the last in the Tangles series for y'all, which started off with air wraps and continued with hyperloops. And today we're going to talk a little bit about orbitals, because everybody knows these are the big sexy thing that you get when you play around with Tangles, right? So first and foremost, a word on hardware. Now, I almost never perform orbitals without a set of Poi that includes swivels near or in the handles themselves. The reason for this is that when you get into an orbital, there's a lot of torque that's operating on the tethers. And you want to have a material that can take that torque. The easiest way to get there is just to have something that can keep on rotating. That's what's going to give you the longest orbitals, of course. There are some other materials you can use. You can use shoelaces or socks because they're a little bit more flexible. They've got a little bit more give. I feel like the exit is a little bit harder with either of those, but you know, there are going to be some people who will disagree with me on that one. Mainly, though, if you're using string or rope, it's going to be really hard to pull this off. In fact, I would argue that with rope, you're not going to be able to do it. So if you can, get a hold of a set of Poi with these swivels in them, it'll make your lives much easier, right? Okay, so now a little bit of discussion of what actually happens inside of an orbital. This confounded me for the longest time. I could not understand the theory of what made that kind of movement work. And ultimately, it proves to be a really interesting physics problem. This is the same concept that makes triple Lutzes and stuff in ice skating work, namely angular momentum. Now, when an object is traveling around a circle, it has a given amount of momentum. That is, it's going to travel a given distance for a given amount of time, right? If you reduce the radius of the circle, it's going to travel the same distance in the same amount of time, but because the radius of the circle has decreased, so has the circumference, which means that to travel the same distance in the same amount of time, it actually gets further through the circle or even crosses over and does a second circle in the same amount of time, depending upon what you've done with the radius. An orbital is the same idea. When you cross over into a hyperloop, you're going into a place where more or less the Poi tethers meet at the middle. When you switch that into an orbital, what you're actually doing is reducing the radius down to, I would say this is maybe like a quarter or a fifth. And when that happens, it speeds up the Poi because in order to conserve the angular momentum, they have to move faster. Like so. And again, once they start losing momentum, in order to get them moving again, you just pull out on the tethers. Very nifty, huh? All right, so how do you actually get into one of these orbitals? Well, this is where it's going to have helped to go through the series of videos before this. I'm going to say that hyperloops are the most important thing you can have under your belt right now, because the position you want to be in order to get into an orbital is the second position of a hyperloop. Remember last week we broke this down such that when the Poi heads cross over each other, you're going to reach this point where the right Poi head goes past the right hand, and then you're going to switch them around such that the left Poi head goes past the right hand. And this is the position you want to be in to start out your orbital. In fact, I could from this position just push the Poi out and automatically get there, right? A really common newbie mistake when they get into doing orbitals is they'll try and pull the tethers out like right the moment that the Poi cross over each other. And what tends to happen when you use socks for this is that they'll actually just pull straight apart. The only reason they're not pulling straight apart when I'm doing it right now is because there's a really narrow choke point here between the Poi head and the tether, right? But just know, it's going to be really hard to get into an orbital from that position. You're really going to want to wait for that point at which the blue Poi is coming up and around. That is, the left-hand Poi is coming up and around. Like so. Another common newbie mistake I've seen people make is they don't realize how much force you actually have to put on the tethers in order to get in. They'll get crossed over and then they'll lightly pull out, And I mean, granted, you can get an orbital going like that, but people want to see the really, really fast one. There's a kind of equilibrium you want to find wherein when you pull out your arms, the poi will be pulling right back at you. And when you reach a point where it feels like those two things have balanced out, that's really where you want to be. Now, the next question is, how do we exit from an orbital? Well, there really is not an easy way. My usual approach to doing this is to take a lesson from those same ice skaters that I cited in the example before. Whenever they do their landings or they come out of those really rapid turns that they do, they open back up so that their angular momentum is dispersed across a larger circle. That slows them down so they can stop. Likewise, when I'm trying to come out of an orbital, 9 times out of 10 what I'll do is I'll open up the circle just slightly. I'll let my arms come back in towards each other, and that helps me sight the point at which they exit, which, if you remember from our Hyperloop tutorial last week, occurs when we are switching up such that the right-hand poi is on its way up. Yeah? Like so. Awesome. So, yeah, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have yourselves a great week. I will be back next week with another tutorial by request. So, yeah, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next Friday. Peace.